and welcome to ECCB Connects. Governor Timothy Antoine continued his second round of country outreach to ECCB member countries with visits to Montserrat and Saint Lucia in January. During the visits, Governor Antoine met with the respective heads of state, cabinets, leaders of opposition, bankers' associations, chambers of industry and commerce, social partners, and the media. Governor Antoine shared with those groups the outlook for the ECCU economy, projections for the global economy, key challenges facing the respective countries, that is Montserrat and Saint Lucia, the importance of building resilience in the ECCU countries, and the ECCB's strategic approach for socio-economic transformation of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. He also provided updates on legislative reforms, the BICO Plan of Arrangement, and the ECCU legal challenge of the CLICO Barbados First Plan. The governor wrapped up the visits with engagements with media practitioners in Montserrat and Saint Lucia. We now bring you excerpts from those two media conferences.
What can the ECCB do to help us to grow our private sector here in Montserrat?
The Caribbean has an infrastructure deficit, and that is particularly profound, magnified in Montserrat on account of the volcano. It therefore means that Montserrat requires grant financing, not debt, because it will not be able to repay that debt given the small population size and revenue base. It needs grant financing for some key infrastructure projects, whether those are in the area of ports, whether that's in the area of energy, or in fact in a number of other parts of the economy. Such as our communication. Very important, fiber optic, telecommunication, that's critical. So that has to be clearly understood. In other countries in the region, we look for grants and soft loans, but they have bigger populations, and even there they're challenged. In the case of Montserrat, it's a no-brainer. Grants are required. In some cases, private sector participation is possible, but even then, there will need to be appropriate arrangements to incentivize the private sector, to reduce the risk for the private sector, because the recovery or payback period is likely to be a lot longer because of the small size and the population or domestic market. Those are Montserrat's realities. There's no question about that. So what I want to encourage is a concerted effort by, of course, the government of Montserrat, working with the UK government and other development partners, and the people of Montserrat, to push forward on some key projects, have them implemented, and give Montserrat the chance to then grow and potentially double the population and, of course, the economy.
I want to provide an update on how black banks in the ECCU are complying with the requirements of the New Banking Act. For example, in Montserrat, I think the Bank of Montserrat seems unable at the moment to raise the $20 million as required. How much time will be given to the Bank of Montserrat to raise this amount, and what's the current risk to the Bank of Montserrat?
The law in Montserrat provides for the governor of Montserrat, not the governor of the central bank, the governor of Montserrat, to extend the period that is required for the additional capital to be raised. And that has been extended until I think around April of this year, at which point in time we will check to see if that situation is completed. There were attempts, and there's been some additional capital put in. So for those of you who don't know, under the Banking Act, the capital required is $20 million for each bank. And then, of course, additional capital based on the exposures of the bank. So on the exposure of the bank, Montserrat is fine, but on the initial capital, obviously it was below. It has come up to, I think, around 13. It has another, and then it did a rights issue, so I think it has another 4 or 5 million to go. Hopefully, Montserrat will get there by April. but the law allows the governor to extend that period. In terms of the overall Banking Act, we have seen good implementation. I must say that we're encouraged by the progress we're making there. One of the key tasks for the central bank pursuant to the Banking Act is to do regular on-site inspections. We have been doing that faithfully. And so every 5-6 weeks, a team from the central bank is in one of our banks doing an on-site inspection. And once those are done, we share it with the banks. Where there's remedial work to be done, we engage them in a formal memorandum of understanding with some timelines to be able to actually implement the corrective measures. And that is working well.
Of concern to many citizens across the ECCU, including here in Montserrat, has been the increase in bank fees. Now, one of the primary reasons for that is the taxes levied by governments on commercial banks. Will the ECCB have any discussion with the government as to how these fees can be reduced?
The Monetary Council is aware of this issue, and as a central bank, we are working to come up with some recommendations for how we could manage, minimize bank fees and charges. Note I said minimize, not eliminate. Because one of the things we have to understand is what is driving those fees and charges. What is driving it? Compliance costs for anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism. Those are imperatives imposed not on the banks, not even by the ECCB, but by the international community. Global Forum, the Financial Action Task Force, and of course, certain things in the US and other places. So those compliance costs are real. Dealing with cybersecurity and countering fraud, those are costs which are being borne. And the challenge is that in these small banks, these national banks, they are bearing them alone. They are not like an international bank that can share the costs across multiple branches in multiple countries. What you have is a situation where you are expecting world-class service from Bank of Montserrat, for example, but Bank of Montserrat has to bear all of these costs on its own. And evidently, it is now finding that it has to pass on some of these costs. That is true of many indigenous banks in the ECCU. And one of the things we have been advocating, and we continue to advocate, is for consolidation at two levels. Shared services. So for example, some commercial banks are now considering sharing services such as internal audit, risk management, IT, all in that reducing the costs. And to the extent that they reduce this cost, it becomes cheaper to provide to you, the customer. If they absorb the cost all alone, then they have to pass it on to somebody, and that's going to be the customer. Now, that is with respect to bank fees and charges. So we continue to look at this issue, looking to see if we could find low-cost, no-cost options to provide to the customers in our banks. Now, on the question of the levy, there are two countries in our currency union that have bank deposit levies: Montserrat and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Those are fiscal decisions. Central bank has no control. And of course, we have to be respectful of the government's right to raise their taxes and their revenue how they see fit. So we cannot dictate and cannot tell the government what to do or not to do. But the banks have raised the concerns with us. They have raised with the government's concern. And I think the government's concern would be looking at them to see what can be done. I think the challenge is that it's a significant chunk of revenue. And so obviously they will be very concerned about how they replace that revenue.
But in your discussions with the bank, since you've been here, were you able to put forward any alternatives in terms of, making up for those shortcomings rather than just imposing what to the average person is just seen as another tax? I mean, we may call it a bank charge, but were you able to have any discussions to go forward with this?
We are discussing this issue, and you're right. We are all concerned about the fees and charges. What are we doing? First of all, very soon the central bank will be publishing on its website fees of our banks. So country by country. So we'll take a basket of services and we'll say in Saint Lucia, here are the fees and charges by each bank in Saint Lucia. And you will see that for all 8 countries in the currency union. We think that the ability of the customer to compare and contrast is important, and of course transparency is going to help that. Secondly, we are working to see whether and to what extent banks can be required to offer low-cost and no-cost options for customers. So for example, if you go to a bank and you ask for a statement, they will charge you. Can the statement be provided online? If the statement is online, they ought not to charge you. So if it's online and the service is available, you can get it at no cost to you. Of course, there's a cost to the bank for providing the service, but at no cost to you. If you choose and insist that you want a hard copy, you're going to pay for it. But we want to see more options available to our customers to minimize some of those fees and charges. And finally, I do feel, and I've said this to the banks, and some of them are making efforts, the associations, to do more of this. But I do feel there's need for a for conversation between and amongst banks and citizens, customers, about what is really going on. Why are these fees and charges happening? High non-performing loans, high compliance costs. Many of these things are being imposed from external forces, not even the central bank. In some cases, it's outside of even the central bank. And they have to respond to that. The final thing I'll say on this issue is that we believe part of the solution is for further consolidation of some of our banks. It is very costly when a single bank has to absorb all of these costs, external drivers, on its own. In contrast to an international bank that can spread these costs across several branches and countries, if you are a national or indigenous bank, there's no way to spread it. It's all on you, and ultimately it means it's going to go back to the customer. So many of our international or national banks have begun the conversation about shared services, whether it is for risk management, whether it's for internal audit, IT, that can help lower the cost. And to the extent that they do that, they will improve their profitability, but also, reduce some of the pressures for bank fees and charges that we're seeing. But it's a very topical issue, and I assure you the Monetary Council is very concerned and focused on that.
Are you seeing any strain being imposed with what is happening in some of the other economies? For example, Trinidad, some of the issues they are facing, and we have some of our member states trading with Trinidad and Tobago. How is that impacting on our foreign exchange reserve, if at all?
Well, our reserves are, as I said, they are strong. You just saw the backing, it's 97%, and we've proven to be a resilient currency over time. It is true that many of them are doing business in the currency union and are taking out US dollars. So they're earning in EC, but they're repatriating profits in US dollars. We know that. What is disappointing is the fact that our traders are having difficulty getting paid in EC dollars in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a major, major concern. So much so that it is affecting trade and it's affecting business. I was in St. Vincent and the Grenadines late last year. And there are farmers who cannot and will not continue to make produce available because they can't get paid. The traders are getting paid in TT dollars. They cannot transact with TT dollars in the EC. It is difficult and frankly very disappointing. The Central Bank of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has made a proposal to Trinidad to facilitate a transfer. We know for a fact, everybody knows, that there's a massive trade surplus in Trinidad's favor. In other words, they export to us far more than we export to them. And we have said, work with us so that once a month or quarter, we will settle the balances, not in EC dollars, in US dollars. And for that, ensure that our traders can get EC dollars when they do the business in Trinidad. That matter is still being considered, but it is disappointing and it is hurting trade and economic activity in our countries. And therefore, it's a matter that I know is now before the CARICOM heads, and we will continue to obviously work to see how we could find a solution for that.
What is the ECCB's plan for all the countries targeting crime or reducing crime so that it does not affect economic activity, especially tourism?
Very good question. A lot of the issues with crime is multifaceted. Therefore, there are many ingredients in finding a solution. On the demand side, on the supply side, on law enforcement, and so on. So, and you know, there are some things the ECCB cannot do, obviously. One of the things that we can do and feel we ought to do is to harden the financial system against crime. And one of the ways that we will have to do that is to reduce our use of cash. At the moment, as far as we can tell, 70 to 80% of all purchases in the currency union are done by cash or checks. 70 to 80%. In the most cashless country, which I think is Belgium, that number is 7%. 7%, we had 70 or 80%. So the question I have is, what will it take for us to reduce our use of cash by 50% over the next 5 years? What will it take? It will make us a safer region. It will make transactions faster. And how will we do that? By using what everybody has these days, smartphones. Smartphones. So we believe that the technology is available for us to use electronic and digital means to make payments. Most tourists who come to our countries now, they're not walking around with a lot of US or EC cash. They don't have the time, or they don't want to have to carry cash. They want to be able to pay via a card or via their phones. So from a competitiveness standpoint, it makes sense. But I'm also arguing that it can help reduce crime. I'm not saying that is a solution by itself. It is not. But I certainly think when you ask me what the ECCB can do, I am saying that is one of the things we can do. It will help harden the financial sector, and it will also improve our competitiveness. And therefore, that is something we strongly want to recommend. And may I say on that, as part of our strategic plan, we are in fact pursuing a pilot on blockchain technology. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is there are three things we are trying to see if they can help us. Three problems we're trying to see if they can help us with blockchain technology, that is. One, can it help us with de-risking, the loss of correspondent bank relations? Two, can it help to speed up payments and transfers, including the traders problem that we just spoke about? And three, can we use it as a digital currency? So we could have a digital EC dollar in circulation that allows us to do business far more freely than we do it now. Why is it that inside of the Caribbean, inside of the ECCU, or across the CARICOM area, we pay each other in US dollars? To whose benefit is that really? It's not ours. Not ours. So the time has come for us to look at these issues. I mean, they're not new, and I say look at them. In the past, they've looked at currency convertibility and they've backed away from it because it's not easy. I mean, the fact of the matter is you have different regimes. Some of us have fixed regimes, some of us are flexible. Like the EC is fixed. Trinidad is flexible. Jamaica is flexible or floating, right? Barbados is fixed. Bahamas is fixed. And then the parity is different. Ours is 2.7 to 1. Trinidad is 6.8 to 1. Jamaica is what, 120 to 1. Guyana is 250. So, you know, we have different parities. So it's not a straightforward issue. But where there's a will, there's a way. And certainly in terms of trade, we have to do more trade amongst ourselves. Yesterday I was speaking to the business community and they were again lamenting the fact that shipping is such a big challenge in the region. They have to ship to, like for example, from Saint Lucia to Antigua, it has to go to Miami. Consider the cost and time, you know. So we have to look at these internal or regional arrangements as we try to remember, get to what? 5% growth. Now, why is 5% important? Let me just say this. The magic of 5% is that if we're able to sustain that over 10 years, we can double the size of our economy. If we sustain that over a 10-year period. So we really have to work to lift the economic activity because that will help all of our citizens ultimately to improve their quality of life.
What international pressure, if any, banks and the ECCB getting?
Lots. for many quarters. So I kind of hinted at that earlier. We're all committed to fighting money laundering and terrorist financing. But the truth is that the bulk of the money laundering does not take place in the Caribbean. That's a fact. It takes place in the major financial centers of the world. And the challenge we have is that, notwithstanding that fact, we in the ECCU, as small states, are paying a disproportionately heavy and high and heavy price to be able to fight money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, let's be clear. The ECCU members are responsible members of the international community. And therefore, they have been and will continue to fight money laundering and terrorist financing. The challenge is that there's a disproportionately high cost on our countries to do these things. So my position would be, we need more engagement with the international community on some of these things, and we need technical assistance to help us implement some of these things, because we're using very limited resources. So that's why our governments don't have more money to fix roads and health care and all of these things, because we have to send people to these meetings, we have to put in laws, and we have to put in IT systems. FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. Millions of dollars are being spent by our countries through the Inland Revenue Departments because we have to be in compliance with the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS in the States. That's not for our benefit. No, we're prepared to work. But you see the challenge we have. So there are a lot of pressures coming, and unfortunately, bank customers see it all the time. And sometimes they blame the banks, sometimes they blame the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. The truth is, many times it's external pressures coming, and that we have to treat with OECD, Global Forum, whoever. And like I said, our countries are working with these institutions. We're members of some of those institutions, certainly Global Forum, not the OECD. But we feel that there needs to be a better way of collaboration. We do not like and do not appreciate unilateral blacklisting. And we certainly do not appreciate impositions without help to be able to meet some of these obligations.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place, at your convenience, check us out on YouTube or Facebook at ECCB Connects.
Governor Antoine commenced his country outreach to Antigua and Barbuda this morning. He met with the Governor General, members of Cabinet, and the leader of the opposition. Tomorrow he'll meet with social partners, Bankers Association, and representatives of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. This is where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Join us again next week when we'll bring you highlights from the second Growth and Resilience Dialogue with ECCU social partners. See you then.